relate to the working of markets, as you would imagine an economist to write upon. But they, in some senses, embody the best of what Adam Smith had hoped for from the economics profession, which was a much deeper understanding of how states work. And Professor Glazer's papers on corruption, Professor Glazer's papers on the American version of the license permit Raj and zoning regulations, his papers on extremism, just testify to the, not just the range of his interests, but if you actually sort of look at them back to back, there is a kind of coherent underlying sort of imagination about how to think about state power in relation to society and markets. It's really extraordinarily vivid. And perhaps sort of marks him out as very unique, very unique in the field. I would also recommend that at some point you go and look up a profile that the New York Times did of Professor Glazer. It's an extraordinary read in and of itself. But if you ever wanted an account of an economist, which basically sort of presented the economist as a dashing romantic figure, but also relentlessly throwing the bright light of intellect on some of our deepest problems, that profile I think captures Professor Glazer's achievements beautifully. He is professor of economics at Harvard University. Has published numerous books. The most recent one, I think, is forthcoming, The Economics of Agglomeration from the University of Chicago Press. Books on housing markets and the economy, risk regulation and policy, corruption and reform, lessons from America's economic history, and just, I mean, as I said, dozens and dozens of top-class papers in almost every top-class journal in social science that you can imagine. So, Professor Glazer, it's truly an honor for us to host you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. That's very kind. I'm really terribly honored to be here, and I'm terribly grateful to all of you for coming and for those very, very kind words. The title is, of course, something of a cheat, as I will certainly be talking a bit about India, but I'm here really to learn about India, not to teach anyone about India. I am very convinced that the most exciting things that are going on in cities in the world today are in Asia. And I'm also convinced that the most exciting things that are going on in Asia are in cities. And as a result, someone who has spent much of the last 15 years thinking about cities in the United States and to a lesser extent in Europe, I think it's high time that I spend more time getting educated about Asian cities, which is really why I'm here. So let me start with what I think is the central paradox that is, running through my much of my recent thinking about cities. We live in a world in which transportation and communication costs have fallen to extraordinarily low levels. We live in a world in which it's easy to communicate across oceans and continents, where we can connect effortlessly with co-authors half the world away. And yet cities are more vital than ever. They're richer, they're more prosperous, they're more expensive to move into, they're larger. But cities are the absence of physical space between people and firms. Cities are density, their proximity, their closeness. They have formed in the past, and they do form to eliminate physical space, to make it easy to interact. Why in the world would we be crowding into cities to such a large degree if it's so easy to interact with people over long distances? Indeed, if we turn back the clock 35 years ago to the United States and Europe in the 1970s, this urban future looked far less assured. In 1975, when New York was declaring bankruptcy after losing 500,000 manufacturing jobs in a short number of years, it looked as if not only the President of the United States, but history itself was telling New York City and the rest of the world's cities to drop dead. But in fact, that isn't what happened. And in the developing world, cities have never seemed like they were going out of style. And that's in some sense the central point, the central puzzle. I'm going to put up a lot of these scatter plots. It's not clear that anyone likes these as much as I do, but I'm very fond of them. And of course, one of the reasons why I like putting up scatter plots is that they make it clear that I'm talking about correlation, not causation, when I'm putting this up. This is the relationship across U.S. metropolitan areas between median family income and density. Larger, denser cities are richer. That doesn't mean there's a free lunch. It doesn't mean that everyone should move to those cities. These high wages are offset by higher costs of living. But it does mean that these places are more productive. And if I, for example, replaced median family income with gross metropolitan product per capita, you would see exactly the same graph. As everyone here knows, there is practically a perfect correlation between urbanization and development and wealth across countries. Right? There is not, no matter what we may have thought about 80 years ago, there is no agricultural path towards permanent prosperity. Right? We can make agriculture more productive. We should certainly do so. The Green Revolution has achieved many good things. But rich countries are urbanized, and urbanized countries are rich. Again, this is not a suggestion that the government should artificially force anyone ever to become more urbanized. But it is a suggestion that urbanization is part of the development process. It is part of becoming part of the rich world. And I think the hypothesis that I'm trying to push, and again, it's a hypothesis that isn't made with a single regression. It's a hypothesis that's made with history and dozens of regressions and lots of facts, is that what globalization and new technologies have done is that they've increased the returns to being smart. Right? We've seen this in scores of studies showing the rise in returns to getting a college education or to a year of schooling. We are a social species. Millions of years of evolution have coded us to learn from each other. Right? Think about how much of everything you know comes from people that you've interacted with. From your first days out of the womb when you were surrounded by your parents and you learned from them, to right now, where we're trying to learn from each other at a face-to-face setting, right? This is what we do. We are people. We are a social species. And that is what cities are good at. Cities are machines for making people smart by connecting people with other smart people, okay? It's the fundamental function of urban areas in the modern world is to bring smart people together and enable them to learn from one another. They are forges of human capital. They are engines of innovation. And that's fundamentally